We're standing by to take you live to the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister Richard Marles. You can see there he's currently meeting members of the Navy ahead of this announcement, a major announcement, the release of the long-anticipated Navy Surface Fleet Review. Also alongside the Deputy Prime Minister is the Minister for Defence Industry, Pat Conroy. As Richard Marles continues to make his way along there, he'll be speaking very shortly. In the meantime, let me just confirm to you what we know. It is going to be an additional $11 billion investment over the next decade. This is what the surface fleet will consist of. 3 Hobart-class air warfare destroyers, 6 Hunter-class frigates. That's going to be reduced from 9 to 6. 11 new general-purpose frigates. This will be an off-the-shelf design. There are a number of countries that will bid for this. The first to be delivered by the end of this decade. The rest will be built in Australia. 6 new large, optionally crewed surface vessels. That will basically, the government says, boost the long-range strike capacity that Australia has. And when we talk about optionally crewed, these are autonomous vessels. They can work by themselves with direction from onshore. So 6 new large optionally crewed surface vessels, which will have a very substantial drone capacity, we're advised. He's, I believe, the Deputy Prime Minister about to make his way. There's the head of the Chief of Navy to his left, Admiral Hammond, Mark Hammond. He's a submariner, and he's obviously a key person throughout this AUKUS period of the Navy's life as well. And so, but this is not the submarine side. This is the Surface Fleet Review. It was announced off the back of the Defence Strategic Review, which was delivered last year. And now we will hear from the Deputy Prime Minister himself.
Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is an enormous pleasure to be here today on a very historic day for the Royal Australian Navy. And I'm joined by Pat Conroy, the Minister for Defence Industry, and Vice Admiral Mark Hammond, the Chief of the Navy, and we also have in our presence Vice Admiral David Johnson, the Acting Chief of the Defence Force. Today, the Albanese government is announcing an increase in the number of warships in the Royal Australian Navy to being the largest fleet since the end of the Second World War. Right now, the Royal Australian Navy has 11 warships. As a result of the government's response to the Surface Fleet Review, today we are committing to take that number to 26. At the heart of that, we'll be building 6 Hunter-class frigates at the Osborne Naval Shipyard in Adelaide. And this will see the first of those ships delivered in 2034, which is the current timeframe. We're also announcing today that we will procure a new general purpose frigate, of which we will procure 11. And this will be a new class of ship for the Royal Australian Navy. We're also procuring 6 large optionally crewed surface vessels. The LOSVs are in development with the United States. They have the capacity to operate in an uncrewed fashion, but it is the intention of the Royal Australian Navy to crew these vessels. They will operate in combination with the Hobart-class anti-warfare destroyers, air warfare destroyers, and they will also operate in conjunction with the Hunter-class frigates. Those ships, in combination with the 3 existing air warfare destroyers, will take our surface fleet of warships to 26. And it is the largest fleet that we will have since the end of the Second World War. When the government was elected last year, the first surface combatant that was due to come into service under the plan that we inherited from the former government was the first of the Hunter-class frigates, which, as I said, is due to come into service in 2034. That timeline will be met. But because of the circumstances, the strategic circumstances that we face today, we are announcing that we will be accelerating the procurement of the general purpose frigate, which will see the first of those in service in our Navy by the end of this decade. And over the period through to 2034, which is when we expected to inherit our first service combatant under the plan we inherited, under this plan we will have 4. So we will be accelerating the surface combatants into our Navy. The plan that we're announcing today will underpin continuous naval shipbuilding at the Osborne Naval Shipyard in Adelaide. The 6 Hunter-class frigates will be built there. The last of those will be completed and enter service in 2043. Today we are announcing that the replacement for the Hobart class, the air warfare destroyers, will also be built at the Osborne Naval Shipyard in Adelaide after the completion of the 6 Hunter-class frigates. That will require a decision to be made in respect of what ship that will be by 2035, and the process for making that decision will commence later in this decade. That means that we have a multi-decade pipeline of shipbuilding in place for the Osborne Naval Shipyard in Adelaide. But today we are also committing to continuous naval shipbuilding in Perth. And today's plan effectively establishes the Henderson Naval Precinct. Last year, we announced that Austal would be the government's strategic shipbuilder in Western Australia. And we announced 2 evolved Cape-class vessels being built by Austal, along with 2 classes of Army landing craft. That will continue. And once that work is complete, the general purpose frigate will be built in Perth at the Henderson Naval Precinct. And the 6 LOSVs will also be built at the Henderson Naval Precinct. Again, this provides a multi-decade pipeline of work in Perth for the Henderson Naval Precinct. Now, it will take time to consolidate and establish that precinct, and as I've said, we need to accelerate acquiring the capability of the general purpose frigates into the Royal Australian Navy, so the first 3 of that class will be built offshore. The Surface Fleet Review has commenced the process by which we will choose the design for that ship. Indeed, it's down selected to 4 potential designs emanating from Spain, Germany, South Korea and Japan. And it is anticipated that decision of the specific design will be made next year. But what this means in underpinning continuous naval shipbuilding in both Adelaide and Perth is that a person beginning their working life now in this exciting industrial endeavour has the prospect of being able to work in that field for the entirety of their working life. And this will be a critical national asset for the country. It builds sovereign capability, but it builds industrial capability within our broader economy. We are announcing an enduring commitment to the establishment of the surface fleet over the course of decades. But a critical component of today's announcement is how this is funded. Over the course of the next decade, the cost of procuring the surface fleet that I've described will be $54 billion. Now, in the defence budget today, there is $43 billion allocated to our surface fleet over the course of the next decade. And so a component of today's announcement is that we are increasing defence spending by an additional $11.1 billion over the decade, which includes $1.7 billion over the forward estimates, so that this plan is fully funded. And this component of today's announcement sets this apart from announcements that have been made in relation to defence procurement by the former government over the last decade. There's no make-believe in this. This is real money which has been worked through the Expenditure Review Committee, which will be allocated in the budget. And when you combine this with the $30 billion of additional defence spending over the course of the decade that was provided for in last year's budget, it takes our nation's defence spending in the early 2030s to 2.4% of GDP. Now, when we came to government in May of 2022, it was anticipated that defence spending under the former government's plan in the early 2030s would be at 2.1% of GDP. The decisions we made in last year's budget and this decision that we are making right now sees a significant increase in defence spending in this country. And it is needed, given the complexity of the strategic circumstances that our country faces. I want to take the opportunity to thank Willie Hillardes, Rosemary Huxtable and Stuart Mayer, who were the leads in the Surface Fleet Review. This was done over a very short period of time. Their work is thorough and thoughtful, and we owe these three a debt of gratitude. Really, they have provided us a blueprint to building the Navy of the future. And as a result of their work, and as a result of the government's response to their work, a person who is joining the Navy today has the prospect over the course of a decade or so from now of crewing an Australian flag nuclear-powered submarine or a state-of-the-art general frigate or the most advanced anti-submarine warfare capability in the world. And this is an enormous opportunity for people who are seeking to work and serve in the Royal Australian Navy in the future. And so today's announcement means that we will be building a fleet which is bigger. It will be a fleet which comes into service sooner. The building of this fleet will underpin continuous naval shipbuilding in both Adelaide and Perth, and we are paying for this fleet.